I was thinking of going into sciences, and I was really into that. In fact, I even had corresponded with Einstein. I have a letter in my scrapbook from Einstein. I wrote him, and he wrote me back and stuff. But anyway, I was really into it. But then my pastor said I should be a pastor, and that created such a conflict for a while that I got out of the box and joined the Navy. Joined the Navy Reserve. Went 2 years active duty right out of high school on destroyers, and then stayed in the reserve. And then after that went to college and seminary. And at that point, Vietnam was heating up, and they were asking for chaplains. But I was still in seminary, so I joined the Chaplain Corps Reserve unit in Minneapolis. And then right after that, I organized a church in Oak Creek, All Saints Lutheran, and then went to University of Chicago in a PhD program. And while I was there, that's when Vietnam was really heating up, 67, 66, 67. And they were asking for chaplains, so I volunteered to go give up my PhD thing and go on active duty. And I stayed on active duty for 20 years. So I went right to Vietnam, and then was there for a week and went right to Khe Sanh a week after that. So with no relief. I was there without any contact relief, and I wasn't quite sure. It was my first active duty, and I wasn't quite sure what to do. But the Marines sort of told me what to do. You know, my colonel said, we'd like to have you go out to visit some of our hill outposts and visit the guys there. So I did. The first one I went to was Hill 881 South. Had about 200 guys on there. Did daily patrols, send a platoon out every day, 50 guys or so. And I did a sermon on the prodigal son, the son who goes off in a far-off country, and I thought that was appropriate. But the company commander, John Raymond, said at the end, he said, well, you shouldn't talk about things you don't personally know. He says, we have a patrol leaving in half an hour, and you can go with it if you want. I got to know the Marines there. I got to know what they went through, how they lived. They went out every third day on a patrol, and these patrols were very. This is before the war even, but I mean the grass was taller than I was, and it was sharp like a razor, and full of bacteria, get sores that didn't quite heal ever, and you just get thoroughly exhausted within half an hour, and the patrol would be like 7 hours long, and I just thought at the end these Marines deserve everything and get nothing, you know. Even in those days, like you go to the bunkers at night where they lived, unless some were fortunate to have a candle, there was no light, there's no electricity, of course, rats, of course, big rats, and eventually, during the siege, I'll move forward quite a bit fast here. During the siege, the Marines at Khe Sanh, we were down to 1 sea ration a day, which is 1 meal or less, and 1 canteen cup of water a day. And so everyone lost a lot of weight. I usually tell people the battlefield diet really works, but you don't want to go on it. It's fatal for many people. I went from 175 or so, 176 I guess, to 129, and I wasn't the only one. These were mainly like 19-year-olds. It was a teenage war, basically. World War II was, the average age was 27. So these were, and they were very playful. And even during the siege at Khe Sanh, when we were taking a lot of rockets and artillery, over 100 rounds a day on our base for 3 months. And like I say, no showers, no the food limited food and so on, and buddies getting killed. But I go to bunker to bunker, trench to trench. My gatherings for worship and prayer could have no more than 7, because we had a hill overlooking us, a range of hills, and we had enemy forward observers on the hills who could call in pre-registered mortars on us and artillery, because we were right close to Laos. They could fire artillery on us. And but in the bunkers, the guys would share their last drops of water, give their last drops of water, or their last sea ration, parts of their sea ration to a buddy if they're, who was hungry or thirsty. And there was humor, people constantly telling jokes on the stretcher when they're wounded. They're moaning and groaning. They'd look at me and say, "Oh, chaplain, don't worry about me. I just got hit in the ass," or something like that. But they were so happy because they were leaving that place, leaving the war, actually. I would say that the Marines I was with were probably the best people I have ever known in my whole life. And I'm a minister, or retired, but I've had many experiences. I've been on ships, jumped with special forces, I was training with SEALs, I've done all sorts of things in my military career. But these guys in Vietnam were some of the best I've ever known. Jonathan Nathaniel Spicer came to me as the base is going crazy. We were taking on a lot of new people at the time because of rotations, a lot of our people were leaving. And Spicer came into my bunker and he said, "I'm a conscientious objector." And he said, and I was talking to him for some time. He looked like he was about 12, very boyish, and he was the son of a Methodist minister. And I said, "Well, haven't you told people along the line that you were a conscientious objector at boot camp and training and so on afterwards?" And he said, "Yes." He said, "But they all said, wait till you get to your next duty station." Well, they just didn't want to do anything. Because at that point, to be a conscious objector is a lot of work. You have to prepare like about a 12-page essay on the development of your conscious objection and instances of like when would you use force and all that kind of, it's very academic. So I said, well, we'll start that. We'll start, because at that point I had already talked with several conscious objectors, including an officer. And having been on several of our hill outposts, we had several of them, at night, on the lines, I knew that if anyone had any doubt at all whether they would fire on the enemy, the whole hill could get overrun. The first sergeant, we call him the top of his company, came to me and said, "Chaplain, you have to do something. Spicer won't take up his rifle, and the other guys are beating him up." I said, "Well, I have a solution. I deserve a clerk, someone to drive me around." No one can under the circumstances, but I said I deserve one. And I live in the medical area where they evacuate all the wounded people. I said, have him transferred to me, and I will have him become a stretcher bearer for the medical people. And that'll solve your problem. And that'll solve his problem. And so on. And so that's what happened. The stretchers would be out there in the middle of nowhere, and Spicer would go out there and lay next to the stretcher or even on top at some times. And he did this for all the way until about the 8th of March, from about the 22nd, 23rd of January when I got transferred to me, to the 8th of March when he was carrying out some stretchers and a mortar round exploded and he took shrapnel in his heart. And the doctors there, who were all new doctors, were not qualified to do heart surgery or anything like that, but the guy would die if they didn't do something, so they did open heart surgery and sent him on to Japan, to a hospital there where he lived two more weeks, but then died from an infection from the operation. And some reporters came later on, and I mentioned that to them, and they went to the colonel, and they were interviewing him, and the colonel said, well, that guy deserves a Navy Cross. And in fact, he did get a Navy Cross. And I always think that a Marine, a conscious objector, getting a Navy Cross, that's just right under the Medal of Honor. And for the longest time, I had guilt feelings because I felt, well, if I hadn't had him transferred, he would have gotten beaten up, ended up as a casualty, or maybe sent off for disciplinary reasons, but he'd be alive. But because I intervened, he died. And I used to share that sometimes in my vet groups and so on. And finally, people made me realize, I'm the one that should know these things, but I didn't. I got this from some other unknown fellow. He said, well, he was just doing what he felt he had to do, and you were just doing what you had to do, and it just happened, and that's the way it is. And so I learned to accept that, but it took it took me 20 years at least to work that through. But that was one incident. There's many I could talk about. We took all this 1,300 rounds or more, and that bunker took a direct hit and killed them all. The rifle was untouched, left outside. But I went down there with the Catholic priest, Father Driscoll, and a bunch of the corpsmen, and with their we call it cracker box, which is their vehicle with a big red cross on it, to transport and I carried out one of the fellows he had no head, just the strings of flesh coming out. And but these are, like I say, this is just the way life was. There were many of these. I could talk about many of them, and you don't have time, and I don't have time to do it. But I made it out without a scratch, without a Purple Heart even. And I was out every day. I was out, going bunker to bunker, trench to trench, amidst all this incoming. But I can say the Lord was with me. Bad events and bad experiences can bring out things in us we didn't know we had, can make us grow, can become stronger because of them.